The long war continued. Abaddon's strategy was bearing fruit, his endless tides of bloodshed and torment fueling the ambitions of the Chaos Gods. Slowly but surely, the despoiler eroded the Imperium's strength, and the veil between the material world and the warp grew ever thinner around the Eye of Terror. However, despite his triumph during the Fourth Black Crusade, Abaddon would not resurface for another 2,700 years. When he returned, it was with a calculated ferocity that would leave the Elysia sector in Segmentum Obscurus devastated beyond recognition. If you don't think you could last 2,700 years between the boring plain walls of your abode, then it's time to get that sorted with our sponsor today, Displate. Displate provides high-quality, easy-to-install metal posters to spice up your walls with designs that show off your passions. Of course, that includes Warhammer, but also loads of other franchises, and even beautiful original designs from their partnered artists. You might think mounting a metal poster is harder than a regular paper or canvas poster, but Displate have managed to make it quite the opposite. Here we are mounting some Star Wars displays we picked up, and all you need to do is stick a magnet to the wall. The poster itself and a bit of physics will do the rest, with the added bonus that you can change which posters you have where by just pulling them off the magnet and replacing them. No marks and no mess, and the magnet comes off markless too. There's a massive selection, and now you can get their Textra range of posters that have a 3D textured effect that looks extra good and turns a metal poster into a true work of art. Browse their selection and see what would work well in your home, and then grab it with our discount code. Go to displate.com/wizardsandwarriors or use code wizardsandwarriors at checkout to get 27% off one Displate, 32% off 2, or 37% off 3 or more. Link in the description. Known for its agricultural bounty and vital manufactoria, the Elysia sector had been left relatively intact during the past 4 Black Crusades. Now, however, it was to become the focal point of Abaddon's cruelty. Striking at this vital part of Segmentum Obscurus would irreparably cripple Imperial logistics. The food shortages that would inevitably follow as a result would make subsequent invasions of the Cadian Gate easier. In addition, Abaddon hoped to further weaken the restraints around the Eye of Terror. A savage attack against a relatively unblemished part of the Emperor's realm would reverberate across the warp. Much like before, the War Master's goal was not outright conquest. He aimed to sow such torment and despair that the veil between real space and the warp would fray, setting the stage for greater catastrophes yet to come. It was therefore in the Elysia sector that Abaddon's strategy of slaughter and disruption unfolded. The War Master's gambit centered on an unholy alliance with Doombreed, a demon prince of Khorne, whose origins predated the Imperium itself. Once a human warlord of ancient terror, Doombreed had ascended to demonhood through acts of unparalleled carnage. Towering and wreathed in black smoke, his form was a nightmarish blend of mortal and demonic, reminiscent of a hooved bloodthirster. Doombreed had plagued the worlds of the Imperium throughout the Horus Heresy, fighting under the banners of the arch-traitor in the name of Khorne. He was one of the numerous warp beasts that attempted to prevent the Emperor from reaching Horus during the climactic battle of the Siege of Terror. To secure the aid of this mighty creature, Abaddon promised a grotesque bounty, a mound of Astartes' skulls to mount upon the throne of the Blood God. As a servant of Khorne, Doombreed was well aware of the fate that had befallen Talamin, the last demon prince to have followed Abaddon in his crusades. Yet such knowledge mattered little. After all, Khorne cared not from where the blood flowed. Talamin had reaped a terrible bounty of skulls before his demise at the blades of the Space Wolves. Doombreed aimed to imitate such commendable worship and best Talamin's tally in the name of the Blood God. The invasion began with precise strikes across the outer worlds of the Elysia sector. These initial assaults were not chaotic bloodbaths, but carefully orchestrated operations designed to sow fear and destabilize the region. Abaddon's forces, spearheaded by elements of the Black Legion, fell upon poorly defended colonies and minor Imperial outposts. They left no survivors, replacing cities with smoldering ruins and ensuring word of their atrocities spread like wildfire. Each victory served a purpose, chipping away at the sector's cohesion and laying the groundwork for the greater campaign. Abaddon's strategy was not just to annihilate his enemies, but to spread terror and doubt, leaving the Imperium questioning its ability to respond to his growing threat. Although formidable, the War Master's fleet was not sufficient to face Battlefleet Obscurus in a pitched battle. Aware of the disparity in naval power, Abaddon resorted to a strategy of cunning and attrition. He deployed his forces in a calculated campaign of raiding and skirmishes. These hit-and-run attacks harassed the Imperial Navy at every turn, compelling its ships to scatter across the sector in a desperate attempt to counter the relentless assaults. This fragmentation of the Navy's strength made it impossible for the Imperium to muster a unified response. Countless worlds were thus left defenseless and ripe for exploitation. Among the most infamous instruments of this campaign was the Flawless Host, a depraved warband of Slaaneshi Chaos Space Marines. Their actions would become a byword for horror throughout the sector. The Flawless Host's marauding forces descended with terrifying precision upon the agri-worlds of Galvan 2 and 4. They laid waste to their defenders in a series of brutal engagements. Entire populations were annihilated in the name of the god of excess. Their suffering made a macabre spectacle for the host's perverse amusement. The Flawless Host's atrocities extended beyond mere slaughter. Their attacks were marked by a deliberate cruelty that struck at the heart of Imperial culture and faith. Holy shrines were desecrated and burned. Imperial artifacts of great spiritual and historical value were stolen, and grotesque acts of sacrilege were committed as a blasphemous mockery of the Emperor. Beyond the psychological toll of these raids, the Flawless Host inflicted devastating logistical damage. Orbital shipyards and vital manufactoria were targeted with perfect accuracy, crippling the sector's ability to maintain and repair its naval forces. The destruction of agricultural infrastructure plunged nearby systems into famine, worsening already dire food shortages and sowing despair among Imperial citizens. The chaos created by these attacks amplified the War Master's broader strategy, ensuring that fear and instability spread like wildfire across the sector. Meanwhile, Abaddon's Black Legion unleashed chaos and destruction across the core worlds of the Elysia sector. Everywhere he went, the War Master left chaos in his wake. The most infamous of these atrocities took place on the hive world of Caltine. The despoiler turned this once thriving world into a charnel house, orchestrating a spectacle of death and despair on an unprecedented scale. His forces enslaved millions of citizens, reducing entire populations to nothing more than cattle for the dark gods. Vast sections of the hive were razed to the ground, while sacred sites and places of worship were desecrated in acts of profound blasphemy. The screams of the suffering echoed across the ruined city, a soothing sound to the chaos gods lurking beyond the veil. However, this butchery presented an opportunity for the Imperium. In attacking Caltine, Abaddon had overexposed himself. His lieutenants were too far away to come to his aid in case of an attack. If an Imperial strike force could reach the War Master, they stood a chance to sever the Serpent's head before Chaos reinforcements could arrive. Regular Astra Militarum forces would never manage to mobilize in time to attempt such a feat. The Hammer of the Emperor was known for its firepower, but not its rapid deployment capabilities. It thus fell to the transhuman warriors of the Adeptus Astartes to put an end to the War Master's depredations. 2 Space Marine chapters answered the Emperor's call, the Warhawks and the Venerators. Both would deploy at chapter strength and finally rid the Imperium of this menace. 2,000 Loyalist Angels of Death, with all of the dreaded elements of their arsenal, were bearing down on the Black Legion. In truth, however, Abaddon's forces were anything but exposed. His lieutenants may have been too far away to provide timely assistance, but this was no accident. The War Master's position on Caltine was a carefully calculated trap. He sought to bait the Imperium's commanders into overcommitting their forces in a desperate bid to claim his head. As the Warhawks and Venerators made planetfall, they were met with an eerie stillness. There was no sign of Abaddon, as the Loyalists deployed every tool of war they had at their disposal. The streets, once teeming with Black Legionnaires, now echoed with the desperate shouts of mutants, cultists and mortal heretics scurrying through the city's ruins. The Loyalists made short work of these lost souls, but their quarry was nowhere to be seen. Still, the Warhawks and Venerators pressed forward. Every step they took carried them deeper into the heart of the city. It became clear to the Loyalists that their foe had either underestimated their resolve or was preoccupied with something far worse. For the Warhawks and Venerators, the chance of ending Abaddon's miserable existence justified any risk. The opportunity to finally crush the madman who had plagued the Imperium for so long was too enticing a prize to pass up. Every fallen heretic, every decimated ruin, only served to fan the flames of their fury. Whatever dark plans Abaddon had set into motion, they would not deter the Emperor's angels. No matter the cost, the Loyalists would not rest until the traitor's reign was brought to a bloody end. Meanwhile, in the heart of the city, the War Master orchestrated a savage ritual. 10 million captured Imperial citizens were sacrificed in acts of brutal slaughter. Their screams were swallowed by the endless chanting of the Black Legion's sorcerers. Blood poured freely into the city's canals, transforming them into grotesque arteries that pumped gore through the ruins. The canals converged at the city's center, where the blood pooled into a massive lake, a nightmarish churning abyss of crimson. The air was thick with the stench of iron and the echoes of despair, as the lake seemed to pulse like a living creature, its surface bubbling and writhing with unnatural energy. As the slaughter continued, the ritual reached its climax. The sorcerers' chants grew louder, their voices blending with the unholy echoes of the warp. The lake of blood, now swollen beyond its banks, seethed with otherworldly power. Finally it erupted, spewing torrents of vitae into the air as a massive rift into the immaterium was torn open. From the abyss, Doombreed emerged. His hulking form towered over the battlefield, his armor dripped with the blood of the slain. Behind him came an army of demons, their forms twisted and grotesque, their eyes burning with malevolent hunger. What ensued was not so much a battle as it was a massacre. The Warhawks and Venerators found themselves surrounded on all sides, trapped with no hope of escape. On one flank, the Blood Lake continued to churn. The demonic hordes emerged in an endless tide, dripping with the ichor of the slain. On the other, the entrenched Black Legion forces sprung from their prepared ambush positions. They unleashed a wave of bolter fire and brutal assaults that prevented the Loyalists from breaking the encirclement. There would be no mercy, no retreat, and no surrender. Every time the Imperial forces attempted to advance, they were met with death. Abaddon had transformed the streets of the city into a killing field. Every plaza was a kill zone, and every road a trap. Brutal counterattacks exploited every weakness in the Loyalist formation. It was as though the very land itself conspired against them, as if the planet had been transformed into a prison designed to crush them. The Black Legion's war machines rolled over the battlefield, unleashing destruction upon the Imperial forces. Chaos sorcerers, their eyes glowing with otherworldly power, manipulated the energies of the warp to claim the lives and souls of the Emperor's finest. Abaddon, as always, was where the battle was thickest, daring the Loyalists to finish what they came here for. Meanwhile, the demons, twisted and ever hungry, reveled in the carnage. Already soaked in the lifeblood of 10 million victims, they tore through the ranks of the Loyalists with savage glee. Their hellblades carved through ceramite, flesh and bone with merciless speed. The air was thick with the stench of death and the defiant roars of the dying. Doombreed was elated. The sounds of mutilation and death were as soothing to him as a beatific choir. With every blow of his axe, a new skull was claimed for the Skull Throne. Both the Warhawks and Venerators fought with everything they had. Their pride as Adeptus Astartes demanded no less of them. Every one of them, from the lowliest scout to the chapter masters, had earned their gene seed through trials that would have killed most mortal men. They were heroes, one and all, demigods out of the legends of old terror. Yet the tide of chaos was too great. They fought on, each moment an agonizing trial. When their bolters were spent and their chainswords dulled, they still carried on the struggle. Each company gathered around their sacred battle standards or the chassis of their honored dreadnoughts. Yet inevitably they were finally overwhelmed. Their ranks were shattered by the sheer weight of the demonic and traitorous onslaught. The battlefield became a sprawling charnel house, littered with the torn remains of the fallen. The Warhawks and the Venerators were no more, utterly destroyed by the forces of chaos. Their gene seed, the very essence of what made them Astartes, was desecrated beyond hope of recovery. What remained of their arms and armor were looted by the Black Legion. Their ships, including their mighty battle barges, would now serve Abaddon as well. Their chapter relics, tracing their lineage and history, would now serve as trophies on the demon worlds of the Eye. In the end, it was Doombreed himself who claimed the skulls of the slain, his towering form cutting a path through the blood-soaked battlefield with ruthless precision. He gathered the skulls of the fallen warriors, stacking them high as grisly trophies. These macabre relics were offered up to Khorne, where they were added to the great throne of the Blood God, a throne that now sat adorned with the skulls of the Loyalists, forever a testament to Chaos's triumphant victory. The Battle of Caltine was over. Abaddon was once again victorious. 2 entire chapters of the Adeptus Astartes had been eradicated in a matter of hours, with very little losses to his own forces. On Holy Terror, the Bell of Lost Souls would sound 2,000 times, one for every brave space marine who gave his life on that black day. After the battle had abated, Abaddon's sorcerers came to him with good news. The scale of the slaughter across the sector had fulfilled its purpose. Their warp senses told them that the thin veil separating real space from the realm of the gods had once again been weakened. Sooner or later, the final blow would come, and the Ocularis Terribus would tear the galaxy apart. The War Master's work was done. Any further actions would be redundant and needlessly risky. The Black Legion once again took to the stars, leaving Caltine a smouldering ruin. Before long, they were on their way back to the Eye of Terror, patiently planning their next incursion. Doombreed, however, was not as clear-minded as Abaddon. He had tasted blood and would not rest until he had his fill. His demonic horde spread out across other unhappy systems, killing as it went. The Black Legion may have been gone, but the scale of Doombreed's massacres still demanded an Imperial response. The Imperial Guard and Adeptus Astartes mobilized in force to put an end to the Demon Prince. Yet it would be the vaunted Sons of Sanguinius that would rid the Imperium of this new plague. A contingent of Blood Angels, led by their chaplains and librarians, sought to imprison Doombreed. They engaged the demon in deep space, set on sending him screaming back into the warp. Unfortunately, the endless slaughter he had embarked upon had greatly strengthened the Demon Prince. In the end, it was all the Blood Angels could do to give their lives in an effort to imprison their foe. In an act of selfless sacrifice, they fought the demon to a standstill aboard the battle barge Eclipse of Hope. Their librarians narrowly managed to seal his soul into a statue of Sanguinius, perishing in the attempt, while their vessel was swallowed by the warp. Millennia later, the Eclipse of Hope would re-emerge, much to the Blood Angels' surprise. Chief Librarian Mephiston would be sent to investigate, whereupon Doombreed would once again be unleashed to plague the worlds of the Emperor. So it was that the bloodletting of the Imperium of Man was fated to continue with no end in sight, and more wars with both heretics and demons alike were on the horizon. We will cover those wars in future videos, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.